Hello, I'm David Mandy, President of O&M Partners. I want to welcome everyone today to the Great Bear Resources Town Hall Call. Great Bear trades under the symbol GBR on the Toronto Venture. They also have a US OTC listing under the symbol GTBDF. Again, GTBDF. I really appreciate everyone's attendance today. For those of you who are new to these broadcasts, O&M is the link between the investing public and public companies, which has become a much more fragmented group than certainly the last cycle. Our digital roadmap, which we developed long before COVID, we've been developing it over the last 6 years, enables us to keep pace with these tremendous changes in investor demographics and how they receive information. We want this broadcast to answer all of your questions. Questions will be easily answered by going to the question portal of GoToWebinar or by emailing us. For any questions that remain unanswered, we'll follow up in a timely manner after the call. And for those who dialed in with your phone, the only way you can hear our pre-recorded introductory presentation by Eric Coffin is on your computer's speakers. If that's not possible, you'll be able to hear the main presentation after about 8 minutes, so please stay tuned. But before we turn to our host, I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker, Eric Coffin from the HRA Advisory. Eric has extensive experience in mergers and acquisitions, small company financing. He's helped found several junior mining explorers over the years and advised many others. While running an exploration consulting firm with his late brother David, Eric also experienced plenty of field activity in a hands-on way, including claim staking, soil geochemistry, geophysical surveying, and all, as well as prospecting. He's been interviewed on several Canadian and US business television programs, as well as on numerous North American and European radio stations. And it's a real pleasure to have him on our call today. So I'm going to turn the call over to Eric.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Coffin. I'm here from my North Vancouver bunker. Like most of you, I suppose I've been staying at home, and you can tell that by my pandemic hair. I'm getting to the point where I'm seriously considering getting my dog to take a shot at cutting it, actually, because it's getting ridiculous. But anyway, enough of that. We're here today to listen to a presentation by Chris Taylor and Bob Singh from Great Bear Resources. If you're a shareholder or someone who's been following the story, you've probably seen one of these webinars before. I've got to say, in all honesty, that this pair of guys does a better job of this than just about anybody. More than one shareholder has said to me that Chris, once he's done with Great Bear, should probably be giving courses to other CEOs in communications, and I actually don't disagree. He's very, very good at that, and that's part of Great Bear's success, but it's not the main reason. You know, Great Bear is obviously a fantastic story. The stock's done amazingly well. I think it's got a lot of amazing left in it, and the reason for that is obviously the Dixie property. Dixie is sort of in, but not within the red light camp. An interesting thing about Dixie was that when it was originally picked up by Great Bear, you know, it was considered to be outside of the red light camp. That's part of the reason why Dixie was available. It didn't appear to fit the traditional model. The rock types did not appear to be the same. They were similar, but didn't appear to be the same as the units that host most of the high-grade mineralization in Red Lake. Obviously, Chris and Bob had some ideas about what they thought was going on. If you look at the outline of the property, it's pretty obvious that they staked it to cover the entire what's called the LP fault. LP stands for lithoprobe. The LP fault is 15 to 20 kilometer deep crustal fault. There's two of these in the red light camp. The other one happens to host most of the high grade gold, or is adjacent to the high grade gold in the original Red Lake gold mine. The assumption being that these deep crustal faults were the fluid pathways. Now the LP discovery was, of course, we were sort of well into things by the time that came along. I think for me, what's more interesting is really how I got on this story in the first place. Chris Taylor, bless his heart, promoted me on it several times over the course of a year and a half. It looked interesting. It was certainly cheap. That was definitely an attraction for me. It had a very tight share structure. Even trading at 40 or 50 cents, there wasn't a lot of market cap because of that. Uh, my concern at the start was really that, well, there were a bunch of high grade drill intercepts here and there. It didn't look like things hung together. And really, this is where the meticulousness of Chris and Bob Singh comes in, because what really sold me on this was Chris and Bob, in doing field investigations, realized some of the hole collars were not where they were supposed to be when they looked at the map and they looked at the physical location. There was substantial differences in some areas between the two things. So what Bob and Chris did was they went back and they did gyroscopic surveys of the hole collars, all the ones where they could actually find the physical hole collar. And in doing that, they got rid of the discrepancies that can get created when you've got problems with too much magnetism in the rocks. It throws off your compass, essentially throws off your compass readings. These gyroscopic surveys aren't affected by magnetism. So they basically found as many collars as they could. They corrected the locations. They went back to the drawing board, put all this into a 3D model, and that's what they showed me about, almost 2 years ago now. And I was quite shocked when Bob walked me through the Dixie Limb 3D model based on their correction of the drill hole collars, because they knew that part of my issue with it before was that although there were a bunch of good numbers, they didn't seem to hang together. When they completed these corrections, they showed me a 3D model of a zone that did in fact hold together quite nicely and was actually quite obviously a linear, steeply dipping zone, had some high grade shoots in it, basically classic kind of Red Lake stuff. I didn't think the zone was going to be fantastic in terms of grade, at least in that area, but there was clearly going to be enough ounces there that the thing made sense. And that's really why I started following the stock. It wasn't long after that they delivered a couple of bonanza holes from Hinge. That really got people excited. It brought in quite a bit of new money at a much higher price. The chief money coming from Rob McEwen. Obviously, Rob's backing of the stock and his publicly getting behind it and writing a big check, that got a lot of people on Bay Street interested, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it's important to understand that a big part of the success here, you know, arguably almost all the success in this deal comes from very meticulous scientific advancement of this property. They've gone step by step. They weren't afraid to step out and look at new things. The LP zone, which is the current focus, was an entirely new discovery on their part. But as I said, if you go back to the original Dixie property outline, what they added not that long before I started following it, it's pretty clear they were thinking that LP was important. It's not a coincidence that the property is shaped the way it is. As it turned out, they were right. They've made discovery after discovery. Right now, this is looking like an extremely large mineralized system. Anybody who wants to can take the data they put out, because they've made a point of putting out shape files and all of the coordinates you need with the drilling to start building your own models if you want to. It's not difficult to come up with numbers in the 5 to 10 to even plus million ounce range if you so desire. To me, this simply looks like a project and a company that's pretty much a laydown when it comes to being a takeover target. Uh, I will personally be surprised if this stock is still around in a year. And I appreciate the fact that management went to the effort of doing a spin out of a 2% royalty. That's something that doesn't have a lot of value right now, but it potentially has a lot of value down the road. I don't think they'll do anything with it until there is in fact a takeover. But I think given the obvious scale of this project, the location, the logistics, I I would be very surprised if every uh, tier one and mid-sized major on Earth essentially isn't under isn't under CA already. Obviously, they're not going to tell me because they're CAs. That's why they call them that. But I think probably everyone is looking over their shoulders. I have no idea what the trigger is going to be for a particular mining company to decide they've got to make a move on it. But I am very, very comfortable Great Bear is going to be taken out probably within the next year. And I was actually very pleased to see these guys do another financing. They've got the money now to really accelerate things as much as they want to once the COVID restrictions are lifted. I don't think you're going to find a more straight up, technically adept team than this one, nor one that genuinely has shareholders' interest at the forefront and has done everything they can to keep the stock as tight as they can and reactive to good news. And of course, there's been plenty of good news. You come to the right place if you're going to watch Bob and Chris follow me here on this webinar. I would definitely pay attention because it's a great group of, and it's a great project and great company. I'm really happy that Chris finally twisted my arm hard enough to get me onto this thing and buying the stock myself a couple of years ago. Take it away, boys.
Thank you so much, Eric. Greatly appreciate your introductory remarks. Of course, Eric is a letter writer and his opinions are not O&Ms, but greatly appreciated his viewpoints. Now we turn to our host. We've got Chris Taylor on the line with us, who's the Director, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Great Bear Resources. Chris has been president of Great Bear since 2010. So that's a long time in the mining industry, a lot of focus on that. He has an academic background in the earth sciences and structural geology. Real key point is Chris has been involved in putting 3 mines into production. He's run projects all over the world, but mostly he's been domiciled in North America. He served as a geologist for Imperial Metals from 2004 to 2009, and he put the Sterling mine into production. Chris also runs a consulting firm evaluating and valuing mining properties in search of mineralization that can be economically mined. And we also have, after Chris's remarks, we're also going to have Bob Singh on the call to talk about, he's the VP of Exploration and been involved with mineral exploration industry for 25 years. He has a very strong technical background in evaluating and exploring. He's focused on both gold and also base metal systems. And he has outstanding geological data management, computer project management abilities as the founder of North Face Software. He serves as president. But most importantly, Mr. Singh has worked for both junior and major mining companies, as well as developed new technologies, as I just mentioned. He's managed several exploration programs in the Red Lake Gold District since 2003 and was a key member of an exploration team exploring for sediment-hosted gold deposits in British Columbia. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the call over to Chris Taylor.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks everybody for attending the webinar today. Try to make this mildly entertaining. I'm going to get the panel off my screen and get my screen into full screen mode here. Just one second. And there we go. You know, it's a great introduction from Eric. Despite speculation over takeovers and all these kind of things, it's really not our primary concern right now. Our primary concern is to continue drilling and to really figure out how big and how wonderful this system really is that we've come across here. So I'm going to be making some forward-looking statements. That's sort of my job in a way, so just keep that in mind. But let's do a bit of a look back and a little bit of a look forward here as we start off. So the share structure of the company right now, we have about 50 million shares issued and outstanding. Fully diluted, that's only about 56 million shares. So this is far below most in our peer group. We've managed to do that by doing a series of successive financings at ever higher prices. We just completed one. The flow-through component on it was $17. We did a hard dollar component at just over $11. That brought in another $33 million. We've been really successful on the ground, and I have to have my hands off to the field crew, our friends at Rimini Exploration. I mean, you guys know who you are, Ricky, Crystal, Terry, everybody. We owe the success of the company to Bob and to these guys because they're the ones that find the gold in the ground. So, you know, and gold in the ground is the driver here. It's been the driver that's got 4 analysts covering the stock so far. There's Kevin at Canaccord, Phil at PI, Tyron at Stifel, and Stefan at Cormark. You know, we've ended up having, you know, these guys have put out a series of estimates recently, much in line with what Eric is talking about. So you can read any of the reports from these guys, and I'll just leave it to that. They're all good reading. So,
Chris, it's David Mandy. I don't want to interrupt, but given the last slide, the symbol on the OTC has changed, hasn't it, over the last 2 weeks? So I just want to make sure everyone has the right symbol on the OTC in the US. It's GTBAF. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, it's a very good point. That was part of when we spun out the royalty recently. We ended up having to get a new symbol at the same time. So just speaking about one of the things that stood out in my mind, which is pretty remarkable when you think about the company so far, is that we've raised a total of about $77 million over the last 4 years, which virtually all of that, it's like 95% of it, I don't have the exact figure, has gone into the ground as exploration. We have a very low G&A. It's a small company in that sense in terms of number of bodies inside and overhead costs. And that means that we've still got, out of the $77 million that we've raised, we've got $53 million of cash in the bank now. So oddly enough, most of the money that we've raised, we still have. So we've spent $24 million on exploration so far, and that's generated a market cap right now of over $600 million. So I sat down this morning and I was like, well, what does that mean on a per share basis? So basically, you know, for every dollar that we've spent on exploration, we've generated $25 of return in the market. So that's what gets you that $600 million plus market cap. I don't know of any parallels really that have generated those sort of returns with such little amount of money spent. And that's a reflection off of the good work that our team is doing and really the exceptional value of this project that we found. So what have we found? People will be familiar with this. We've drilled gold in this LP fault target at our Dixie Project near Red Lake for over 11 kilometers of strike length. And we're drilling off a panel of drill holes right now, 5 kilometers long by about 500 meters deep. Obviously, we've already drilled deeper holes than that, which are hitting some really nice grades. You know, but what we have is a very big gold system. And there's really 2 types of gold systems on the project. And I think this is a little bit hard for us and the market at large to get their head around, but we're looking at something in the middle of our property which resembles the famous Hemlo discovery. It's structurally hosted, high-grade disseminated gold. It's predictable because it's been highly sheared, and it's in similar types of felsic volcanic rocks. But right beside that, we have normal Red Lake style stuff, which is high grade gold in veins. And really exciting for us is that all of these go right to the surface. So we put out some really, I would describe them as gangbuster results today. It was about, the total interval was about half an ounce, so 15 grams or so over about 45 meters. And that gold goes right to surface. Now the core of that would be about 20 meters of about an ounce per ton, over 30 grams per ton. And we're seeing this sort of high grade mineralization continuous section to section to section along strike length on this big target. And again, we're drilling that off for over 5 kilometers in a detailed grid this year. So, you know, we've announced that we have a $21 million exploration program underway. Nothing's changed there, except our ability to expand it. So there'll be news in the near future about how we're going to add new targets, extra drilling that we're going to do, all these things. But the core of the work right now is completing 300 drill holes roughly into this LP fault this year and seeing what that yields. And of course, this is an early stage discovery. There is no resource present on it yet. We just found it a year ago. So it's been too soon to get a resource together. So here's a map of the project in front of you. You know, I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you could invent a mining project and give it really good characteristics, this should probably be it. It's not under a body of water. You can see that on the map here. It's right beside the highway, not underneath it. So you don't have to move the road around or anything. And you've got a power line and you've got a major mining town literally right beside where we found the system. So we were only about a 15 or 20-minute drive from downtown Red Lake. And that means all these other mines in the area, the main Red Lake gold mine, Pure Gold, is going into production at the Madsen property now as well. I know Rubicon is working on the Phoenix deposit in the area as well. These are all about maximum about a 30-minute drive from where we are. So we always make the joke, and it never gets old in my mind, that it's really Tim Hortons coffee exploration, because you can pick up that coffee in the morning and you can drive out and be at the drill rig just in time to have it cool enough to drink, and it's still, you know, piping hot. So it's very close by. So really unusual combination of great location and a big high grade to surface gold system. And these are the key slides. I'm not going to go over these in too much detail, but starting on the top left, as Eric alluded to early on, there's two big faults that are imaged from geophysical work that was done by the government in this area. We staked one of them, its entire intersection at surface along a folded greenstone belt in our area, the Dixie Greenstone Belt. The other big fault is located beside the main Red Lake gold mine. The mining along there has produced over 25 million ounces of gold. So this is why we were so interested in staking the project, and why it's a big rectangle that's 22 kilometers long, because that's the distance that the fault transects our project, and that's why we staked it. So what do you have? Effectively on the bottom left of this image, you can see that you have a zoom in off the middle 5 or 6 kilometers of the center of the project where we're doing our grid drilling, this LP fault zone, and beside that in DL and DHZ, these Red Lake style gold in vein zones. And what does that look like? Well, on the top right part of the image, you're looking at a cross section that goes across both zones. And what you see there is steeply dipping zones in both areas. The one on the right is this big Hemlo style system. The one on the left is the Red Lake style stuff. And you can see there's good results in both areas, excellent drill results in both areas. And I don't know the total number of drill holes on the project, but it must be in about the 400 drill hole range at the moment. If not, it will be there shortly. So we have a lot of data to back this up. This isn't artistic license that you're looking at. It's all data driven. And so you have, you know, the image in the middle top of the page is, you know, high grade gold from the hinge zone. That's one of these Red Lake style zones up on the left part of the cross section. And the images on the bottom right, you can see a really highly deformed rock with a lot of gold in it. Well, that was stuff that we put out this morning. It was 18 plus ounces per ton, about, I guess it would be a couple hundred meters vertically from surface. That zone goes right to surface in the LP fault, and that's what it looks like. It's just a lot of visible gold. Well, when you're drilling into, you know, 18-ounce stuff in this area, you're bound to see it. And this is what progress looks like. So, you know, exiting last year, we'd been drilling this LP fault for about half a year, and you can see on the left side of the image, what's really fascinating is the size. You know, you're looking at about over 4 kilometers of strike length along that fault zone, and you can see the grade is really what sets this thing aside. Like, you're looking, the pink bubbles are more than 20 grams per ton gold. And that's really remarkable if you think about it, that the red on there, they're actually 5 to 20 grams per ton. The greens are 3 to 5, and the blues are 1 to 3. So on the left side of the image, you could see where we were going into 2020. And on the right side of the image, that's the updated section from today. Again, BR 137 was the hole we highlighted today, 14 grams over 45 meters. Most of the gold in that's within the 31 grams over 20 meters. Had some really, I would call it bonanza grade stuff, about just over half a kilogram per ton gold over a meter. And you can see there how it's filling in very, very nicely. And you can see, looking at this image, we're not having trouble at all hitting gold long strike. In fact, every single drill hole, which is over 100 holes now, 115 holes, every hole that we've drilled along the LP fault has gold in it. There are no holes that don't have gold mineralization that actually are directed at the fault target. So pretty incredible when you think about it that way. And I just put this up because I wanted to doodle a couple of things on here, and I think I'll be able to do that in a sec. So you can see what we're looking at here, you know, is an area of relatively dense drilling in the middle of it. And I think that's about 1.5 kilometers long. So if you put that into sort of context, you've got 1.5 kilometers where we're getting dense enough drill information, another 1.5 kilometers up on the left side of the screen where we just don't have very much drilling. You can see that it still has the high grade intercepts that are really driving our interest on these areas. And then there's another 1.5 kilometers on the right side of the image, which is where we actually found this gold system originally. And you can see that that's filling in very nicely as well. But the difference is when you were looking at this zone early on and with the drilling that we're doing, there are still massive undrilled gaps in this that are 300 meters wide effectively. Some of these are 150 meters wide where there just aren't any drill holes yet. And you can see even areas like this, that's about 100 meters between those two drill fences where there just is no drilling. So far, what we're seeing is, again, this central area, which is really coming together nicely. We've got another one here, which looks like it's sort of going, my speculation is that based on what we're seeing, those are going to merge at depth, just complete speculation at this point, but it's coming together very, very nicely. Very hard to deny that we have excellent continuity of mineralization in this zone. And why we're so excited about this, and I keep going back to it, the reason is you're looking on the left side of the screen at what we've found so far at the LP fault, and on the right side of the screen is our closest geological analog. It's not exactly the same, but it's close, the Hemlo deposit, which is owned by Barrick. And Hemlo's produced over 20 million ounces of gold. Most of that gold at Hemlo, it comes out of this. So about 90% of the mineralization comes out of this. It's about 2.6 kilometers long. It averaged about 8 meters wide, and it was about an average of 8.5 grams per ton. So, we're looking at something with what we're drilling off right now. We've already got more than 4 kilometers of strike length here. We've actually drilled it for another 6 kilometers over in that direction. It's just that this middle area looks like where we've got the best sort of grade and width concentrations. It's just, it doesn't end. The mineralization does keep going, but we're focusing on this area. So in that 2.6 kilometers, these guys were able to generate a 20 million ounce resource, or mine a 20 million ounce system, I should say. On the left, ours, we don't yet know how many ounces there are. We've only known about it for about a year. It takes time to drill these things off. But one of the principal differences between these guys is that we have a lot of high grade gold right to surface. Like that's the surface line up at the top here. You can see that that 20 gram plus material, we're seeing it along strike, really in all areas. And at the Hemlo deposit, in comparison, this is where you got the high grade coming to surface or close to surface in those two areas. Most of it came in below about 500 meters vertical depth. So, we're very excited by this. There are differences as well. We don't have molybdenum. We don't have very much arsenic, antimony, these kind of things. We basically just have gold in a very highly altered system. Bob will talk about all that afterwards. But continuity, let's talk about continuity. So in the middle of the system, you can look at some of these numbers. Like here's BR068. So you have, 10.5 grams over 21 meters. The next section, 100 meters away from that. Some really nice stuff, 18 grams over 13 meters. You've got here 3 grams over 56 meters, including 10 grams over just about 7 meters, 50 meters away from that. Again, right from surface, you're looking at here, 10 grams over 18 meters, an ounce over 2.5 meters. Like these are excellent results, but they're also highly continuous. And internally, the reason that we put these out sometimes is you can see that what we're doing, we're not trying to smear grades. We're actually trying to drill across this thing and make it as skinny as possible. There's a lot of companies out there that'll stick a hole here and they'll go straight down and they'll try to inflate the widths. We don't do that. We go across and we try to make it look as narrow as possible. It's just that as narrow as possible for us is still pretty good. So you're looking at an average width in the Red Lake area of about something that would be about 2 meters wide. So on the scale of this, the average mining width in Red Lake is 2 to 3 meters. It's probably about that wide, whereas you're looking at a gold zone on our project, which is roughly, here it's about 200 meters wide, here it's about 200 meters wide, and here it's about 200 meters wide with another zone developing. So you have about 400 meters of width on the gold system. And that gold system, remember, is multi-kilometers long. Here's another section where we have dense enough drilling to make these kind of discussions, but we talked about this just over the last couple news releases. So again, some really nice holes here, 15 grams over 25 meters, an ounce over 12.4 meters, again, right from surface. And then below that, you've got 5 grams over 16 meters. Below that, you've got, 24 grams over a couple meters within, just about 2 grams over 72 meters. Next section here, 14 grams over 45 meters, an ounce over 20 meters. The next section beside that, you're looking at, you're looking at mineralization here, which is, here's one of the highlight holes that we had before. So you can look at that, 48 grams over 8.7 meters. That's the next section 50 meters over. And continuity across multiple kilometers here as well. So, 1.2 kilometers between here, 2.4 kilometers between here, gives you an idea. The northwest part of the system, some of the grade that you're seeing, the sort of towards the middle part of the system on 21-150, the continuity of grade vertically, continuity laterally, and then off on the southeast, when the system starts to skinny out towards the margins, as I was talking about before, you have the same rocks, they're just not as wide, and the gold system here is, say, like 7 grams over 3.5 meters, but it's the same mineralization section to section to section over that strike length. And I thought, just to really hammer it home, I had fun doing this because I figured, well, how do we show this? And Bob's going to do a great job. I'll do this really quickly. If you look at the table on the left, the gold results are in the red or in the yellow column. The widths are the one beside that. So 32 meters of 1.79. Here we have 3.9 meters of over 10 grams. The next section along, 93 meters of 0.5 gram. I'm just going to flash through these quickly, but you can see multiple zones, 45 meters of 0.7, 16 of 0.75, 2 meters of 190 grams, including 0.5 meter of 760, and another zone here, 14 meters of 12 grams. But just flashing through quickly, 44 meters of 1 gram, 71 meters of 1.3 grams, including 20 of 2. 41 meters of 1 gram, 37 meters of 1 gram, another zone. Looking along here, 149 meters of just about 1 gram, including 125 meters of 1 gram. And you see the variation as we go along strike, section to section to section. There's no areas where you're not hitting mineralization as you go along strike, often multiple zones. I put this up here because these are some of the worst sections that we've drilled so far. So where the zone gets skinnier around here, still mineralized, right? So you're looking at mineralization is still present. It's just not as wide as others. And then as you go along strike, it picks up again, 4 meters of 16 grams, 45 of 125, 3 zones here, of which you're seeing like, 7 meters of 11 grams. You've got a little middle zone there. And then you've got another bigger zone beside it, which is, say, 3 meters of 26 grams. Beside that, again, you can see the variation, 107 meters of 0.6, other zones around that, 26 meters of 1 gram. Beside that, multiple zones, 40 meters of 4 grams, 6.8 meters of 10 grams, 9.3 meters of 24, however you want to skin it, 1 meter of 94 grams. Right beside that, 21 meters of 10.5 grams, another zone, 31 meters of 1 gram. Right beside that, 3 zones, 6 meters of 16, 66 meters of 2 grams, 25 meters of 5.6, 8 meters of 13. That's the next hole along. Another section here, again, you can see it's a bit skinnier, multiple zones here though, over more than 200 meters. And again, 71 meters of 1 gram. You can see this repeating, 49 meters of just about 2 grams, picking up again, 53 meters of 4.2 grams, 42 meters of 5.8, including, 1.5 meters of 100. Right beside that, 25 meters of 15 grams, including 1 meter of 103. Right beside that, 45 meters of 14. This goes on. These are some of the results that we've seen. It doesn't stop. The thing is relentless, and we keep drilling it along strike. So that was the point I wanted to make, just to hammer home the continuity. And of course, beside the LP fault, we have the Red Lake style systems. These are very much like what the Red Lake gold mine was based on, that Goldcorp mined for many, many years. We recently drilled our deepest hole on there, almost 800 meters down, which was over 2 ounces over 2.65 meters, within 10 grams over 19 meters. And there's multiple gold veins that parallel that LP fault zone. We call those the hinge zone. These are some of the numbers from the hinge zone. So, this is a satellite satellite system beside the LP fault, but still generating like 5 meters of 190 grams, 7 meters of 68, 7 meters of 1 ounce, 10 meters of half an ounce, 22 meters of 4 grams, including 3 of 14, 15 meters of 5, 12 meters of 6, including, 1 meter of 1.5 ounces. Very nice results. But again, Bob will go over all that in 3D. So I just wanted to emphasize the continuity, how excited we are with everything that's going on here. And now I think it would behoove us to look at it in 3D under Bob's gentle ministrations. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Chris. I'm going to walk us through a PowerPoint and then through the actual model itself, and just to sort of focus more on the geology and less on actual numbers. Really, just talk about the geology and talk about how we can model these zones and how they fit together, and potentially, the genetic association of these zones. Some of these slides we've already seen, so I'm just going to skip through some of them and move into some of the more technical geological slides. As Eric alluded to earlier, the project is located in a unique greenstone belt within the Red Lake District itself. Down in here, this green rock here, these are known as the greenstone belts. It doesn't have a physical link back to the main Red Lake greenstone belt in this area here. You could argue that maybe some of these little tails and folds may eventually work their way back up through here, through the Pure Gold Madsen area, and then on into the Red Lake. But we don't have any age dating, and we certainly don't have any regional data to say that yes, these are the same or not the same. But it is a unique greenstone belt in the district, and it's one that has been overlooked in terms of exploration in general. And we're seeing a lot of similarities, and I'll walk you through some of those rock types and some of the structural relationships and how this model looks. On the property itself, we have drilled and prospected and mapped and reanalyzed historical data, relogged core, and have come up with what we believe is a model for the project, where we have the limb zone and the hinge zone, these two stars down in here, as well as the LP fault zone here, and a number of regional sniffs in gold. We drilled holes and we intersected anomalous mineralization, some of which looks like the LP zone, some of it which looks more like the hinge zone, limb zone style. But we have a very large system, and it's in wide space drilling in the early days has shown us that there's a lot of gold in the property wide. And then we obviously have concentrated gold into areas where we have done a lot of detailed work. And from a pure geological point of view, a structural point of view, we have two, you can call them terrains if you like, but two sort of areas in the property where we have identified folding and faulting. And the main deformation zone hosts the LP fault zone. That's this colored area in between two folded terrains on either side of it. And where we see the difference is in the core samples. When we drill this, we see significant differences in the rock types, in the structure, and in the behavior, the resultant behavior of gold mineralization, quartz veins, and other geological features that are associated with the mineralization. We can characterize the folded terrains very simply, much like the Red Lake District. These are rocks that started out life flat. They were tilted, rotated, and ultimately folded. And the hinge zone vein systems sort of lie in these hinge domains. And when you fold these rocks, they create weaknesses, they create fluid pathways, and that's where that gold is located. Looking at the LP fault area inside of that colored zone, we interpret this best as a flattened and sheared flow dome complex, where probably in original life it started out in cross-section views at some sort of a complex flow dome complex. These are known geological formations around the Earth. We have all of the rock types that make up this sort of an interpretation. Over time, it's compressed and tilted, and now we're looking at it in plan view. We're looking at it from top down, from outer space down at it, and it's been sheared, and all of the units have been rotated and moved around. You can see, whatever was a big intrusive here now is almost flattened in this place here. And so this is how we interpret that internal deformation zone. It's an ongoing shearing and straining of the rocks, remelting, recrystallizing things, and increasing the metamorphic grade as well. And what do those rocks look like? Inside of the folded terrains on the left of the image, we have basalts, we have quartz veins with gold in them, we have replacement zones. And inside of the deformation zone, we have these highly strained rocks. This image here on the left, these are sediments, and those fragments that you see are broken beds, broken and transposed beds of sediments. And then we have alteration, we have silicification, we have lots and lots of alteration associated with this very large deformation zone. And visually, I think almost everybody looking at this image can see the difference in the rocks, and we see the difference in the rocks in hand specimen at all times. And you know, at any time in the core shack, we have numerous geologists logging core, and everybody's on rotation, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks in and out. And so there's always somebody new on a drill. And currently with 3 drills, we had 5 drills pre-COVID, back to 5 here once we have restrictions lifted. At any one point in time, there will be 3 or 4 or 5 geologists looking at drill core from several kilometers apart. And you don't always come to a consensus. You don't always agree with the rocks that you're seeing. So the textures are fairly unique, and everybody records them and describes them. But we also collect geochemistry. We collect a lot of structural data. We collect a lot of geophysical data. And all of these data sets overlap with each other, confirming our initial assumptions of what these rocks are, how to describe them. So what I'm trying to say is, regardless of how many different people describe the rocks, we always come back and sort of have a consensus and look at things like the geochemistry. For example, in the mafic volcanic rocks, we do a standard, what's called the Jensen cation plot. These are simple plots to discriminate between various rock types. The majority of the mafic volcanic rocks lie within this field, inside of this mafic to ultramafic field of chemical field. Contrast that to the LP fault system. Almost everything is in the felsic domain, in the rhyolites and in the dacites. And again, we see them visually, we see the differences visually, we also see those differences chemically in the data as well. So it helps to back up our interpretation that these are different rocks in the different zones. We also have structural data as well as geophysical signatures of these various rocks as well. Some of the rocks on the right here is downhole magnetics. Some of these are highly magnetic. The hot colored areas are magnetic rocks, and the blue colors are non-magnetic rocks. So they have magnetic properties. They also have structural properties. These are stereonets on the left image. The orientation of fabrics and folds change with different rock types and different parts of the property. So these 2 or 3 layers of data points all help to sort of evaluate and interpret the geology. And our best sort of interpretation that we have today, and this is the slide that Chris had on earlier, is that we have this LP fault system, and it occurs within dominantly felsic rocks and some metasedimentary rocks. We have the Dixie limb and the hinge systems. They occur in mafic volcanic rocks, and they occur at contacts between one mafic rock here and a second mafic rock here. And it's that contact, that weakness between those 2 rocks that's often mineralized. And it's a physical barrier. It's a chemical and a physical barrier. When fluids move up from the Earth's crust into these rocks, they find that barrier, and that's where gold deposition occurs. Contrast that to the LP fault system. The rocks, yes, they're more felsic, they're rhyolites and dacites, but we still have this contrast between sediments and felsic volcanic rocks. And that seems to be a focus of fluid as well in here. And we have incredible strike length to these sediments and felsic volcanic rocks, as we'll see in the next slides. And that's how we interpret the gold to be continuous as well, is because it's occurring at these contacts. When we look at different rocks across the property, the star on the right shows you the image that I'm going to show you next, and then there'll be another image that shows up. And just to compare the rock types, the rocks, how they look, and these are obviously gold samples and various different samples. So the star here shows where this sample is from, and then the image that's underneath the star here is the next one that's going to show. And here you can see visible gold all over the place here. And you can also see quartz veining, and most of this quartz veining is fairly, it's late. Some of it is folded, some of it's cross-cutting fabrics. There's a foliation fabric developed in the rock here as well, intense sericite, intense silicification as well. It's a felsic volcanic rock, and it is completely foliated and flattened, and the gold has been recrystallized along these foliation planes. The next sample over comes from a couple of 100 meters away, and again, it's the same texture. It's a foliated rock with very little quartz veining in it and visible gold. You can see though in here to the finer eye, and I'm sure some of the more technical people on the call can see it as well, there's a ghosty sort of a breccia texture here. There's fragments within this, and I'm just circling some of these fragments here. So there's another level of deformation that's gone on here as well, that is associated with this deformation zone, this internal deformation zone, where we see very little folding but more flattening and shearing. The next image is from the northwest. This is the discovery hole up in the northwest area. Again, high grade gold remobilized out into the wall rock and into foliation planes. This piece of quartz here, initially we thought some of these were quartzite, but the petrography work that we did shows that they're actually fragments of quartz veins. So at some point there were probably intact quartz veins here, and they probably had gold in them. But over time and an increase in deformation, these have been broken, flattened, sheared, and the gold's been remobilized, recrystallized into these fabric planes that you can see quite clearly in here. There's a little bit of sphalerite in this slide as well, zinc sulfide. The next image is from the middle area. This is the gap area. Again, intense silicification. And in this particular rock, you can still see some speckles of crystals, and you can see some ghosty sort of outlines of what used to be probably a porphyritic rock, a felsic porphyritic rock. You can also see a bit of a remnant of a quartz vein here as well, some silicification and other sort of elements to this. And of course, you know, a lone speck of visible gold in here as well. But again, a very different alteration system to the hinge and limb, which we're going to see in a couple of slides out. This is BR20. One of our early discovery holes in this part of the LP fault zone. And again, this one really shows nicely that foliation plane here and how the gold is lined up within those foliation planes and subparallel to it. Contrast to the limb zone. This is the deep hole that we drilled underneath the limb zone. The gold here is occurring within quartz veins, on the edges of quartz veins. As well, you can see the folding in the rock here. You can see that some of this biotite is folded. We don't see these textures as easily in the LP. We do see them in some places, but we don't generally see them like this in the LP fault system. The next slide is the high grade zone at the hinge. And again, we see these are mafic volcanic rocks, and almost all of the gold is confined into quartz veins here. There's the margin of the vein. There's some inclusions in it, and then but all of the gold is inside of the quartz vein. I'm going to skip out of these videos and just walk us through the geological model, just to sort of get an idea of what we see on a day-to-day basis and how we can try to interpret the mineralization and the subtle differences between the LP fault zone and the hinge zone. This is the property boundary itself, and I know certain viewers are going to have a lot more lag than others do, so I'm going to pause just a little bit as I rotate around and move things around just to allow people to see it. This is the 3D block model of the claims, the property position. I'm going to just rotate back down to plan view, so this is looking at it from outer space. And I want to show a couple of cross sections and just some fly-through type of images through the middle of the zones, so that we can get an understanding of the challenges of modeling a system like this, and also just so that we can see what it's like to see these zones together and how they actually fit together with each other. And you'll have to excuse me because I'm moving back and forth from different screens here. This is the hinge zone and the Dixie limb zone in plan view. And as I rotate it around here, we're looking at gold intercepts within the drill holes. And this is all intercepts, let's say greater than 0.1 grams per ton. And I'll just change that filter so that we can zoom in and look at just 3 gram per ton material. And the first thing that strikes us about this, and this is, again, Eric had mentioned this early on when we had resurveyed historical holes, we started to see this linear element to the Dixie limb. And that's what you're seeing here, the right side. As I roll this around here, you can see it forms a sheet. And you can interpret this in a number of different ways. You can talk about them having offsets and faults and folds, but at the end of the day, you have to sort of realize that they form a sheet, and it doesn't really matter which way you look at it. There's a sheet of mineralization here at the Dixie limb. It's not as easy on the left side to line them up at the hinge zone, for example, because it's a little bit more complicated. The hinge zone has a different type of vein system to it. So I can't just rotate, for example, this hinge zone around until things line up. So how do we interpret the hinge zone and the limb zone together? And I'm just going to go back to plan view here. I'm going to rotate it so we're looking straight down these, and I'll cut another cross section for us here so we can get an idea of what these zones look like in section view. And it's really important to sort of understand how these zones come together and what kind of work is required to drill these zones when you're looking at them in cross-section view. So as I rotate this back to that cross-section view, the sheet on the right is the Dixie limb, and I'm gonna look straight down that sheet here. That's the Dixie limb, and on the left-hand side is the hinge zone vein systems. And you can see that they're complex. They join in and out of each other. Sometimes they're parallel to each other, and other times they merge in and out with each other. And you can sort of look at that interpretation and say, well, how did you come up with that interpretation? You're not underground, you can't see the veins. How do you do it? Well, we use oriented core data, and we collect this. We've collected it from day one. And what we do, these are quartz veins. These little discs that you're looking at are quartz veins within the drill holes that have been pierced through these parts. And what we do is we look for veins which have gold in them. We look for textures of veins, and then we use this orientation data to line up the veins. And I'll just zoom right in detail here to one particular spot. You can see the lines of the discs here are straight up and down following the red zone. And then they slightly turn here to the northwest. There's other veins that are cross-cutting at right angles, but very important to recognize the veins that have gold in them versus the veins that do not have gold in them, because there's an entire generation, there's 4 generations of veins here, district-wide, and 99% of them do not have any gold in them, so you can't use their orientation to target drill holes. We really do specifically look at the veins which have gold in them. So that's the hinge and the limb zone and how we interpret it. And you can see at some point at depth, they're going to come together. And our deep drill hole that we had put in sort of got close to this spot, but it was a little bit above that intersection still. And so at some point down there, they may merge together and provide us with a clue into the look and the history of it. Now, that's the hinge and the limb, and we want to now go over and have a look at the LP fault. And just in terms of comparison of scale, as I zoom back out here, you can see that's the hinge and limb, and there's the LP fault system on the other side. Now, I want to model the LP fault, and I want to try to see if I can turn the LP fault and rotate it so that it lines up perfectly, just like the Dixie limb did. And that's the challenge right now, is how do we determine how this gold mineralization over at the LP fault is going to join from cross-section to cross-section? Can we do it with just the assay? So as I rotate this around and turn it, I'm trying to find lines of assays. And it doesn't really matter how I rotate and line this up here. I have a hard time seeing through this and finding lines of discrete assays like I did at the Dixie limb. So, and I'll just flash that for you for a second, because I can do that at the Dixie limb fairly easily. I can just turn this thing until those numbers line up. I can't do it at the LP fault. So we can't just rely on assay data to tell us that things join from one spot to another. We need something else. And so what we sort of use here is the geology. And we really want to emphasize that the geology is continuous and the gold mineralization is related to the geology. So this is looking at it in plan view from outer space. If I rotate that image so we're looking straight down that rock type, this is the metasedimentary marker sequence. When I look at that and I turn on some of the other rock units that we have in here, we start to see a relationship between the folded rock types and the distribution of the gold mineralization. So now when I do my rotation here, it's not enough to just turn and try to find lines. You actually have to turn and follow along the face of the surface of this unit to try to find lines. And as I move in more, I can turn it again and follow that orange plate and try to line things up. And what you end up doing is you end up interpreting a zone which follows the folding, follows the orientation of the folds. I just cut that away a little bit. I'll clean that up for you. It turns and it rotates along that folded geology. And that's the key to us following this zone up. And when we first started drilling this, we had drilled it on 1 kilometer centers. And then we tightened up into 400 meter centers. And we continued to sort of tighten up and follow it along strike until we were able to put together what we thought. I'm just going to draw on here just a little bit for you. So initially we had completed fences across. In this area, we had extended some drill holes in this area, historical. We drilled some new holes into this area. We had stepped over here, and that was our drill spacing. And we hit the same rocks. We hit the same geology, same looking alteration, and of course we had gold mineralization in every one of them. Then we started to fill in, and we went about 400 meter centers into here and into here and into here. And we kept doing this throughout the year to try to see if the geology still hung together, and it did. It all hung together. So when we started splitting the difference again, and we started to see more and more distribution of higher grade material when we started to split that. So now we're in here filling in 50 to 100 meter gaps, and we still have some left over. We still have big gaps in this area out here that we still haven't filled in, but we were getting some of our best numbers in here. So it made more sense to sort of fill in details in here and start to fill in details in over here. And as we started to fill these details in, what became very, very apparent is that the geology is continuous and that the mineralization does follow that geology very consistently across the strike length of this. And when you look at the distribution of grade along that sort of 4.2 kilometers of strike length, what we see is really, really continuous mineralization. We're looking here now at all intercepts greater than 1 gram per ton. And I can filter that, say, up to 5 grams per ton. And there's still a very continuous chunk of mineralization at that 5 grams per ton. And even at 10, there's still very continuous mineralization concentrated in a few areas of increased drilling, but there's still continuous mineralization. When I drop it down to sort of that 100 ppb and not detection, but anomalous gold values, you start to see what Chris was talking about earlier, the success rate that we've seen on drilling at the LP fault system, where every hole that we've put through that comes close to that marker sequence, which is defining the fault for us, intersects gold. And when you look at the relationship of that gold to what we see at the Dixie Limb and the hinge zones, the scale is 5 or 6 times the size of it. The depth potential is still very real because we know now we can intersect gold mineralization at depth here below the hinge zone. Down in this area, we know we've hit some mineralization in the wrong rocks below the LP. We've yet to sort of drill that area below the LP fault system, and to just sort of re-emphasize and bring the point home a little bit in terms of where we are on the property and how this sort of sits in relation to the claims position. This is where those two zones sit right now, sort of in the middle of the property, and they're associated with this broad warp in the geophysics, and the geophysics helps us to guide exploration. Of course it does. It helps us to focus our efforts on structures and other things. But keep in mind, you know, gold is not magnetic. And so the magnetics alone will not help us to find gold. But what they do help us to find are these broad warps and broad sort of changes in the foliation pattern. Say there's one here, you know, there's others as well. There's broad warps in here. The hinge zone and the limb zone are sitting right in here. But there's several features regionally here that we're very interested in from an exploration point of view that we need to continue to explore going forward. I'm going to wrap it up there and pass it back to our hosts.
Thank you so much. Great presentation on the geology. It's been a long call, but we're going to try to get some of our questions in. We'll start with Bill Burt. Bill, do you have a question today for the for management? Down at the bottom, Ali. You need just to unmute Bill Burt. Okay. Bill, question today? You're unmuted.
I'm fine. It's covered.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll turn to Steve Rentschler.
Yeah, hi, Chris and Bob. Thanks so much for all the work you've done. Very, very happy. I'm sure you guys are ecstatic. I'm just curious. I'd asked you, say, close to a year ago, before all the LP had gone here, about what you thought the eventual shareholder, you know, the best way to maximize shareholder value was. This is getting so big. Do you still envision that this is going to be one hunk that's going to be sold off, or are you starting to think that maybe you could play a role and get Great Bear to take some sort of a JV position or free carry, something like that, so that you could carry on the exploration? Because it seems like even with an increased number of drills, you guys could be going on here for quite a few years.
Yeah, I really would like to see, you know, we have a view, Bob and I and the geologists on the project have a very different view off of the size of the project versus the market. I mean, people sometimes get a little bit, I don't know, distracted by the fact that we have a high share price, but from a market cap perspective, we're a lot smaller than companies that have much smaller deposits than what we're probably looking at here in our view. So, you know, like, I'm not going to name names in the market, but I mean, there are much larger companies with much smaller systems. The importance here, I guess, is to understand, like, something like we put out today. So, you know, if you think about that, it's an ounce over about 20 meters. That's comparable to the original high-grade zone discovery at the Red Lake Gold Mine. And the high-grade zone discovery, you know, it would have averaged probably over 2 ounces per ton gold, probably, you know, an average of 2 meters wide, 3 meters wide over its production life. But, you know, it's similar in terms of being able to generate these sort of crazy gram meter values that we just saw here. The high-grade zone discovery founded Goldcorp, which was a multi-billion-dollar company. The difference is, in a sense, I mean, it was dimensionally, you know, it went down for great depth, multiple zones. It wiggled its way down through different rock types, but it began at like over 1,000 meters vertical depth. We have sort of comparable results that are coming out here from the surface. So, you know, if you were to give me, if you stack them both and there were new discoveries side by side today, I would pick ours 100% of the time, because you get a very big system, but you also get a lot of high grade gold right to surface. And, you know, that's the kind of value that I look for in the future. And the drilling will unlock it as it keeps going and people understand the continuity, the high grade content, the presence to surface. We'll continue to drill. We'll continue to take the project down more advanced pathways. Obviously, once we've done enough drilling, you can do resource calculations, then you start doing economic studies. But from that valuation perspective for us, it's very early days now. And if it were valued the way we think it should be, I think the company would be a lot larger. So there's a lot of work to do before we think about selling out or anything like that. This project here could be the basis of a very successful company in its own right. It certainly would be a jewel in the crown if it ever became an acquisition.
Right. And one geologic question, just so the way you described that LP zone, or Bob did, if it came up as some sort of a dome and then got tipped over, et cetera, does that mean that it won't be expected to extend to depth like at the Dixie hinge in the limb? or does it still come up from depth? And also that north fault that we talked about a long time ago, is that an entirely different sort of thing, or is it somehow related to that LP?
I'll let Bob take that one. Bob?
Yeah, I will. So yeah, good question. The rocks that are hosting the mineralization in the near surface are this tilted flow dome, and they are squished, and they will have a limited spatial extent because the dome, it only has so much. But the mineralization, the fluids that came in, they came in after everything was tilted and upright and brought upright, so that when you look at I'll just sort of try to show this to you as a cartoon. When you look at a cross section through the geology here, what you see is at near surface, there's a flow dome complex. And that flow dome complex, because it's 5 kilometers or more in strike length, may very well be several kilometers deep. It may not. It may be that we drill, down below this thing and we have completely different rocks down there. But the fluids came up after everything was tilted. And so the fluids, you can imagine, came up a structure somewhere at depth here. And off of that main structure, we have these splays and that's the fluid movement. And as we go down deeper here, maybe the rocks are the same, or maybe they're completely different. Maybe there's mafic volcanic rocks here now, these green rocks down here instead of the flow dome complex. The gold-bearing fluids are still there. The vein, the mineralization may look different, but the fluids came from deep, and the source of the gold is deep, regardless of what the rock type is there. It just so happens right at surface here, we have this nice flow dome complex that's a great host, but it doesn't mean that deeper down, maybe there's mafic volcanic rocks and it'll look more like the Hinge, or vice versa.
Also, adding to that, I mean, it's seen such a huge amount of flattening and deformation. If the flow dome complex has been drilled over 5 kilometers laterally, the most reasonable expectation is that it's probably present for a similar distance vertically as well, which is way deeper than you'd ever need to hit it with the drill rig. Or, the deepest mines in this area, they're down to about 2.5 kilometers depth. I mean, if it's 5 kilometers long, it's probably about that deep as a rule of thumb,
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. We're going to keep moving here. We have Steve Magruder. Stephen, questions today?
Yes. Chris and Bob, excellent presentation. It's wonderful. I wonder if you could quickly update us on exactly where we stand on the drilling. And I know that you can't make a determination, but how should we look at this? And when are we going to see the next drilling program?
Well, Bob, you're the one supervising the rigs. I mean, I would speak just, it continues to drill. I mean, we've actually, we continue to do regional exploration as well, which is something that we don't talk about directly, but when we get results back, we'll talk about that too. But really, I mean, we've got, more than 180 holes that we still need to do into the LP fault this year. You saw some nice surprises when we did the first deep drill test at the Dixie Limb and Hinge. We will be doing deeper drilling onto the LP this year as well. So look forward to that as an extra event, and look forward to the extra regional drilling. Otherwise, as we begin to fill this thing in, you're seeing these sort of grades that nobody expected. Like certainly today, that 500 gram material, we were expecting to find it as we did the drilling, because it makes sense logically, structurally, chemically. We knew we would find this sort of bonanza grade stuff. We know we would find these thickened zones on the LP that are basically also higher grade. But there's going to be surprises as we go along, and it's amazing, all these 100-meter, 200-meter gaps that still exist in the LP fault. Some of those will probably hold surprises as well, but otherwise just a steady stream of drill results, much like you've been seeing in the recent past.
Thank you, Chris. We'll turn to Ron Shore. Ron, question today? Ron, you're unmuted. Okay, we'll come back to Ron. Let's turn to Peter Epstein. Peter, question today?
Yes, hi, thank you for the call. I was wondering if you could remind listeners what other mid-tiers and majors are in the district that could be interested in your company.
We've seen a broad spectrum of interest in what we're doing. It's not geographically constrained. Sort of, the mid-tier and larger producer sides from all around the world has certainly, reached out and are following along with progress. Locally, the largest company is Evolution Mining that bought the Red Lake Gold Mine. So they're basically completely redoing things there. They're going to go back underground and get busy. I mean, they just made that purchase. I think it's going to take them a little while to figure out what they bought. In terms of like a smaller producer, Pure Gold Mining is going into production near us. So they've got about 1.5 million ounces in terms of a mineable reserve, I believe, and they have about a $500 million market cap right now. And there's also, Rubicon Mining, which has the Phoenix deposit on the northwest part of the district. So they've got a nice mill on site, and they're drilling underground to define resource so that they can have a big enough gold system to put through the mill. I know that one's a bit of a famous story. I won't get into that. So those are sort of your primary local players. But I mean, in terms of, we've had interest in this project from all over the world, from an early stage up into, it was a very busy prospectors and developers convention for us in March before all the COVID stuff kicked in. So it's certainly known across the industry at this point.
Thanks, Chris. Great answer. We'll turn
David,
to... Yeah.
I did want to mention that Ronald Shore did type in his question. I could read that now if you'd like.
That'll be fine. Sure.
Bob, how many different geologic events have occurred in the LP fault and in the limb hinge areas?
Yeah, it's another question that we struggle with at all times. We liken this to being one event, one big event where the fluids moved up from a deep crustal source, and then they encountered different geology, different rock types, and deposited gold. Now, that being said, there's clearly a secondary deformation event over the LP fault that we don't see at the hinge and limb zone. And just as an example of how that looks is we have myelinitic textures and we approach amphibolite grade metamorphism in the LP fault, and we don't 1 kilometer away at the Dixie limb and the hinge zone. So there's a subsequent structural deformation event that probably outlived gold deposition and peak deformation, but the source of the mineralization is more than likely a singular event. And then what's transpired after that, we're still gaining a better understanding of.
Great answer. Just for everybody to know, our calls generally go about an hour. This is definitely a special situation, and we have plenty of questions, so we're just going to keep going. And appreciate everyone staying with us at this point. We'll turn to Michael Potter. Michael, question today.
Hi, Chris and Bob. I mean, it's really a fantastic gold system you've got hold of there. What drill spacing do you think you're going to need to get down to before you're going to be able to confidently estimate indicated resources?
Yeah, I'll answer first before I let Bob get into it. I mean, this has been something that we're quite interested in as well. And, it's amazing. If you tried to wrap numbers around this, 6 months ago, for instance, I mean, you could have calculated a resource at that time on the inferred level, but we had no idea there was as much high grade gold as consistently as there is now. So, when you get into resource calculation, the denser you drill it, generally the capping, which is the removal of the high grade numbers, the denser the drilling, the higher that goes. And we're consistently, I've looked at it before with Bob, and he showed you a gram and a few grams and sub-gram, but you see the same pattern if you look at it at 10 grams, 20 grams. We've even looked at it with like 100-gram filter on, and that kind of material is in all areas. And that's really impressive that the more drilling we do, the more we realize that we're going to be able to include more of that high grade material. So I don't yet know the correct drill spacing. There are parallels. Like you could look at Hemlo, which is one of the comparable deposits to us, and the initial inferred drilling I think was at about 60 meters, and then they dropped down to, what was it, Bob, 35 meters or something like that?
Yeah, about 30 meters or so. And just to further that point, at the Dixie limb and the hinge zone, we have lots of analogs in the district to help us to guide how we get to inferred, indicated, measured categories on resource drilling, because they're vein systems, and we know how to deal with them. The LP is a different system. Again, like a Hemlo type of system, where you make your drill spacing ultimately may be wide, it may be narrow, but it's going to be dictated on geological continuity. And one of the things we're working on right now is how continuous is the geology and the control to the mineralization, and do we have a predictive model can we step out 50 meters and predict the geology and the grade and the thickness of the zone in those drill holes? And those statistics ultimately, months from now are going to help us when we get back with our resource consultants and just say, okay, look, this is how we did it. We predicted the grade across this distance in these drill holes, and we were successful or not successful. And variability in these deposits always comes down to predictability. And if you cannot predict 25 meters away, you have to drill tighter than that. If you can predict 50 meters away and you hit it, then you question whether or not you have to drill in between. You do a few spots, you test the ideas, and you increase your statistical database of predictability. And that's where we're at right now. We certainly don't have an opinion right now. And just to throw out a really bad number, if we were to sort of follow the guidelines of high-grade vein systems in the Archean, 10 to 12 meter centers would be years of drilling on this large system. So we're trying to be as pragmatic as we can, as economical as we can, but also as practical as we can. We want to make sure if we can predict it, then certainly the grade variography will be affected by that predictability.
Yeah, and the predictability so far is really good. Bob's point about size is the main point here. Like, if you look at the image right in front of you right now, each one of those squares is 750 meters long. That grid square that's sitting on top of these, like, I can look at comparable companies which have larger market caps than Great Bear. Their primary discovery zones are half of one of those squares. That's the size of their system. And, they have better valuation than we do, simply because the work is a little bit further along. This is a brand new discovery for us, but I'm not aware, like, Bob, who else is drilling a single zone this size really anywhere in the world right now? I'm not aware of any. So, it's unusually big, it's unusually continuous. And right now it's unusually predictable. We need to show that with the drill spacing. Like, an unusual discovery requires unusual proof. Fortunately, the proof is coming in regularly now, and I think the last few news releases and the ones that will be upcoming, if I can look forward predictively, will show the same thing. I think you're going to see that continuity, and it's going to show that what Bob is talking about is emerging very nicely. Like, the geology predictive model here is really coming into its own. It's showing that the gold is where we expect it to be.
Thanks for your color on that, gentlemen. We're going to turn to Jeff Masseri. Jeff,
hi.
question?
Thank you, Chris and Bob. That was really a very, very deep and thorough presentation. And I've had most of my questions answered. I'd like to turn to some financial questions, please. Do you have any debt?
No.
No debt. Good. What you said that are your figures in US dollars or Canadian dollars?
These are Canadian dollars.
Canadian dollars. Okay, good. Now, you said you were going to spend 24 million on drilling this year, that would leave about 30 million in cash. What is your cash burn, monthly or quarterly?
Well, our program for all of this year was about $21 million, and we've already spent, roughly, what is that, about $7 or $8 million of that, Bob? I would say at this point, because I'm tracking the monthly invoices. So, the remaining expenditure this year is probably about $15 million. It depends how many rigs we have on the project. Like, our G&A on a monthly basis, like rents, salaries, that kind of stuff, non-geology, my guess is it's about $150,000, somewhere in that range. It's tiny. So basically, almost every dollar that we spend goes into drilling. Right now, we're at 3 drill rigs active because of COVID. When the COVID restrictions lift, it'll be back up to 5. And I imagine there'll be further expansions over the course of the year, just as we begin systematically testing certain targets. So your burn rate varies, but you will have spent during entire 2020, we will have spent $21 million on the project, of which I would suppose there's about $14 million. So you're at about, my guess is we probably have about just high 30s, so $39 million, $38 million in the bank by the end of this calendar year. And then we have about another, I would say $24 million planned for next year so far. So even with that, we'll have, maybe $12 to $14 million at the end of 2021 in the bank still. Would be about how it'll work out.
Thank you, Jeff, for your questions. We're going to turn to James Coantis. James, question today?
Actually, David, James typed his question in, so I'll read it aloud. It's for Chris. In a forward-looking blue sky kind of way, can you provide perspective on the potential share price upside from these levels or previous M&A events in gold or other sectors that might be relevant to Great Bear? Thank you.
Okay, really this comes down to how many ounces in the ground we end up defining. So assuming that we, assuming that it's something along, like there's quite a spectrum right now in terms of what the independent analysts are publishing. Like we're not going to be publishing numbers of our own until all the work is done and all this, but they're broadly expecting between about 0 meters and about 500 meters depth. So pretty much what we've drilled so far. We've actually drilled deeper than that. They're saying that they're expecting sort of 5 to 10 million ounces to come out of this. Our neighbors in this area that are further down the road, like Pure Gold, for instance, they've got, I forget what the total resource is there. It's a couple million ounces, but I think the mineable reserves are about 1.5 million ounces. So, if you have basically their market cap's about $500 million, and you divide that by so they're getting over $300 an ounce in the ground valuation. So, if I look at it and the analysts that are covering us are correct, which we don't know, nobody knows until you do the drilling, but say it's $300 an ounce that the company could capture in value times, 5 million ounces. That's about $1.5 billion of valuation. And of course, if it's 10 million ounces, it's about, $3 billion of valuation. Those are just totally speculative numbers until the drilling is done. But Red Lake area, the one thing that you can say consistently about it is once you have defined resources and reserves and economics, the per ounce values in the ground tend to be in the hundreds of dollars per ounce range. So depending on what we're working on here, it's certainly the upside case is many multiples of our current $600 million market cap. So provided those numbers are all in line, right? So if it's a bigger system, that's all from 0 to 500 meters. Like you think about the mines in this area, the Red Lake gold mine went down for over 2 kilometers depth. So you would, if this system is also deep seated, and remember, our first deepest hole was also the best hole in that target. It was about, 10 grams over 18 meters or something like that. So, you think about that, and if you double or triple what we're working on right now, you'd have to double or triple the numbers that I just gave you for potential value. It's just that at some point, the system is so big that I know that it's undervalued from my point of view. That's my perspective. I can't say I know it, but I believe that it's very much early days. And as we progress, like everybody else does, you capture that value over time. But we don't know how much until we do the drilling. Right now, it's wide open. The deeper we drill, it's been really good. We've gotten really good results. There's a lot of other targets on the project as well. But even without those, the LP fault is still the biggest new gold discovery in Canada for a continuous gold zone like this. So, it should, over time, because of its position, the high grades, the presence to surface, which is highly unusual, all those things should get sort of a premium valuation, provided it keeps going the way it has.
Great, Chris. And to be fair to Pure Gold, they're on a different end of the spectrum here. They're about to cash flow. They're the next one to go into production. So They
That's what I'm
deserve
saying.
kudos for that. That's for damn sure.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we're going to turn to George Peckler, please. George, question today for the team? George is unmuted. George, a question? Okay, we can just mute George out and get his question to sign in. I think what we're going to do is we've got two more people that we're going to ask questions of. We're going to turn to Chesley Morton, and then we'll end up with one more person, then we'll proceed to close. Chesley, questions?
Yes, David. First of all, exciting news today. Just wonderful. But you hit on something there, and that is you've got a big system. You've got a big system, and you think you might be undervalued. Although there are those who argue that you're overvalued based on a 10 million speculation. So it's kind of wide open. It's a mystery still. There was some talk earlier about you possibly being a target a year from now. I think that's a bit soon, but how do you address the pressure to know as much as you can as soon as you can? Do you do that through infill or a step out, or both, a little bit of both?
It has to be both, Chesley. Like, you know, we've done both consistently. We keep getting nice surprises when we step out. You know, you've got, Bob's showing it on the screen, but you have, you can see that there is gold over 11 kilometers so far along that LP fault. You know, I don't have any desire to do dense drilling along, say, that 6 to 8 kilometer area right now, because, like, you know, there may be other zones. They'd probably be shoot-like in that area. Like, I've seen very positive results. It's a stream of steady results with the infill that we're doing and the step out drilling that we're doing, testing new targets. There's no way at this point that we've found all the gold there is to find on this project. Like, you get outside of that LP fault, and like, we've seen gold popped out on the side of rhyolite dikes. We've seen gold popped out just about any sort of you know, chemical and lithological contrast. It's all over the place. Like, it is a, I hate to say it, and it's a, you know, but we always privately say it's a monster of a system. That's what the geos in the field think. That's what I think. That's what we all think. There's other zones too. Like, if you look at the drilling that Bob has in front of you, you can see there's a line of drill holes south of the LP fault that are emerging into basically another gold trend between the two of them. And the deeper drilling that we've done on that, the grade is substantially better. So, you know, he's looking at it, it's going east-west in front of you right there. And it doesn't really occur at surface, but as we go deeper, we see more of that kind of stuff. So like he was saying, you know, you're going to end up with a situation here where you need to do the regional step outs and you need to do the fill in. And I think that combined approach is what's going to capture the best value.
Okay, we've got one more question. We're going to turn to Andrew Safini. Andrew, question today?
Good afternoon. You guys have done a fantastic job. Really appreciate all you've done and how safe you've been through this COVID period. I was wondering, you know, we've got depth that you haven't explored yet. It's hard to believe, you know, that can go 2 kilometers or more. But, you know, I guess my question is, when you go to accept an offer, can you piece off this 4 or 5 kilometers, including the hinge up to the highway, and then sell that off, and then, you know, go explore to the southeast and the northwest, and then shareholders can realize value of those blocks of land later?
Yeah, very likely. I mean, if I were a company trying to buy an asset, and again, I mean, I would much prefer to just sort of develop this on our own for a number of years. I think we'd do very well by shareholders by doing that. But if I were a company that wanted to take this project on, I'd want the whole thing, because you know, based on what we found already, that, you know, you would expect, I should say, that you would find other discoveries over time. So there is a lot of blue sky. The way that we have that sort of thought out at the moment is that we staked a number of other projects in the Red Lake area, which are based on the similar types of geological criteria that we staked Dixie on. Those are not part of the Dixie project, and those are the kind of things that over the long term, you know, maybe if somebody is interested in this, we could work on. Now, again, like the bottom line is here, let's focus on the task at hand and make sure that we get this thing more fully valued than it currently is. And right now it's looking like that process is going well. So that's really our focus.
Thank you for your question, Andrew. We have a large number of questions from the audience, which we promise to get back to. We'll get them to the company and we'll get back to you with answers after the call. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back to Chris Taylor and Bob Sink for the closing remarks, please.
So I'd like everybody I'd like to say thank you to our shareholders. I mean, we're doing our best day to day to generate as much value as possible. It's working out really well. That's because of the the meticulous work, as Eric said, from Bob and his team. So I would say we're fully funded now for 2 years of work here, and that means that you're looking at a share structure that's unusually tight and responsive in the industry, and you're looking at a team of people that have an unusually good track record of finding and developing what they found. So I would say buckle your seatbelts in a little bit of a way, because I think it's going to be an excellent year for us, definitely the best yet, and I really look forward to delivering that steady stream of results. So that would take it from us. Just follow the news flow, and anybody that has questions, please email the company, call me, call investor relations, and we'll address what those are.
Thank you, Chris. Bob, shall we turn to Bob for any remarks, or turn to close?
I'm good there. Thanks everybody for allowing us to talk about it. It's a lot of fun, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. And I just want to mention that Rita Bennett heads up investor relations and is a good person to contact if you have any further questions. Appreciate everyone's attendance today, and I want to wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Thanks again for your time and your attention. Have a good day.